Some people do not bury you because you are dead. They bury you because your existence is inconvenient. That is the first thing you need to know. The second is worse. They will cry in public while they do it. The ballroom rose to its feet when Yoon Tae-wook lifted his champagne glass and smiled up at the portrait of his late wife. Cameras flashed. Violin music floated over $800,000 worth of white peonies, imported orchids, and candlelight arranged so carefully it looked expensive enough to be grief. A screen behind him glowed with her face, younger, softer, unsuspecting, while the gold lettering beneath it read, "The Nneka Memorial Charity Gala." He had perfected the role over 5 years, the grieving widower, the dignified CEO, and the man who had suffered a tragic loss and somehow found the strength to turn pain into philanthropy and a second marriage into a shipping contract. There are men who can build towers with one hand and graves with the other. "To compassion," he said smoothly, glass raised, "to the woman we all still miss." And right then, at the exact moment his guests lifted their glasses to toast the dead, the front doors opened. Not dramatically. That would have been mercy. They opened with the quiet efficiency of expensive hinges, and Nneka Obi walked in alive. No veil, no trembling, no apology. Black silk skimming her frame, diamond studs catching light, scar hidden near her temple if you did not know where to look. Her back straight, her chin level. On her right stood Kwon Hyuk, Tae-wook's estranged younger cousin, on former head of family security, the only man in that bloodline who had ever looked at her like she was a person instead of a strategic asset. The room did not gasp at first. It forgot how. That kind of silence is not empty. It has weight. It climbs onto people's shoulders. It pushes down on the chest. It forces truth into the room by refusing to let anybody breathe around it. Nneka crossed the floor, while her husband stared at her like he had seen judgment arrive in heels. Then she reached the head table, placed one hand on the back of the chair marked with her own memorial name card, and said, "You started dinner without me." A champagne flute slipped from someone's hand and shattered near the donor tables. Nobody turned. Tae-wook lowered his glass very carefully. That was his instinct always. Control first, truth later, if at all. He stepped down from the stage in polished black shoes that barely made a sound on the carpet. His new wife, Choi Mi-ran, turned toward Nneka slowly, one hand still wrapped around the stem of her glass, emerald necklace bright against silver silk. Chairwoman Yoon Soon-hee did not move at all. Her fingers tightened around her napkin. Hands tell the truth before mouths do. "Nneka," Tae-wook said. "Not my wife, not thank God. Just her name, dry, unsteady at the edges." Hyuk touched the back of Nneka's chair, offering, not steering. She sat. He remained standing beside her with one hand loosely at his side and the other near his jacket pocket where the original mechanic's report rested in a cream envelope. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, black hair swept back, jaw clean shaven, knee posture loose in the way only dangerous men can afford to be loose. His gaze never went to the portrait. It stayed on the room, the exits, the security, the men whose shoulders had already changed angle because they recognized what his stillness meant. Power described itself through effect. Conversations died, backs straightened, eyes lowered. Tae-wook stopped at the edge of the table. "This is not funny," he said. Nneka looked down at the menu card in front of her. Chestnut soup with truffle foam, butter-poached halibut, galbi short rib with pear glaze, yuzu cloud cake. She let her eyes travel over each line as if she had all the time in the world. "They remembered every dish I hated," she said. "That's almost touching." That line hit where it needed to. A few people shifted. The one man let out the kind of breath people make when they realize this is no longer spectacle. It is memory, specificity, which means truth. Sun-hee spoke first. Her voice was smooth enough to pass for civility if you were foolish. "What exactly is the meaning of this?" Nneka lifted her eyes to her former mother-in-law. "The meaning," she said, "is that burying me did not take." A whisper tore through the back of the room. Mi-ran's gaze snapped to Tae-wook. Not dramatic, just sharp, calculating. She had lived in that family long enough to recognize when a sentence landed too cleanly to be theater. Taewook spread his hands slightly. If you've been alive this whole time, then clearly there has been some misunderstanding. Nneka leaned back in the chair. You held a funeral. His jaw shifted once. No body was recovered, she said, so the misunderstanding happened before the mourning. Silence. The violinists had lowered their bows. One waiter near table 6 froze with a tray of champagne in both hands, eyes fixed somewhere over Nneka's shoulder, as if looking directly at this scene might implicate him morally. Here is what you need to understand about rooms built on money. They are only elegant while everybody agrees to maintain the lie. The second one person tells the truth cleanly, all that expensive polish starts looking like panic in better fabric. Nneka reached for the microphone lying near the centerpiece. Taewook moved. Hyuk moved first. He did not grab him, did not shove him. He simply stepped into the line between Taewook and Nneka with such calm finality that Taewook stopped instead of colliding with him. No, don't, Hyuk said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. A young executive near the back lowered his phone without being told. One of the hired security men by the west door took half a step back and pretended he had intended to stand there all along. Taewook looked at his cousin. You have no idea what you're doing. Hyuk's face did not change. I know exactly what I'm ending. Nneka picked up the microphone. The feedback clicked once. Settled. 200 people held still. If you are ready for this story, she said, and her gaze moved slowly across the room, from donor wives to hospital board members, to the men who had applauded her portrait every year and called it compassion, stay with me. A beat. Now, because this one is for everyone who has ever been underestimated by people who benefited from not seeing them clearly. Then she looked back at Taewook. Since all of you came to mourn me, she said, the least I can do is tell you how they failed to kill me. The sound the room made then was not a gasp. It was recoil. Taewook's hand clenched at his side. Sunhee's face did not crack, but her right thumb began stroking the edge of her linen napkin in short, precise movements. Anxiety in old money language. Miran set her glass down before she dropped it. This event is over, Taewook said. Nneka's eyes never left his face. Or what? You are not well. There it was. The oldest trick. If a woman arrives with inconvenient truth, break her credibility before she finishes the first sentence. Nneka smiled. Small, lethal. Ma, then this should be easy for you, she said. Correct me when I get the details wrong. She laid one hand on the cream envelope Hyuk set before her and said, 5 years ago, your family doctor diagnosed me with infertility in a consultation room at Yoon Medical Center. 3 days later, divorce papers were drafted before I agreed to anything. That same evening, my brakes failed on a coastal road in Jeju. Taewook answered too quickly. The police investigated that accident. Hyuk placed a second folder beside the envelope. Nneka tapped it once with one finger. Did they? No one in the room missed the way Taewook looked at the file. That was not confusion. That was recognition. Good. Let him feel the floor moving under him. Nneka lifted the mechanic's report from the envelope but did not hand it over yet. An original tow intake, she said into the microphone. Jeju Provincial, front and rear brake lines severed cleanly. Miran turned to her husband. What is she talking about? He did not answer. That was answer enough. Nneka let the room sit in it. Let rich people have the experience of not knowing where to place their eyes. You all knew me in fragments, she said. Donor wife, surgeon in photographs, the elegant African wife at family events. What most of you did not know is that I spent more nights in trauma bays than at charity tables. I opened chests after highway collisions. I repaired livers after stabbings. I stitched boys back together at 3 a.m. while your invitations were being embossed in gold. A woman from one of the hospital boards looked down. Because now the shame was spreading properly, not just to the Yoons, not to every institution that accepted the official story, because it was smoother than asking whether any of it made sense. Nneka's voice stayed level. My value did not begin when I married into this family, and it did not end when they decided I had become inconvenient. Sunhee said, whatever grievance you think you have. Nneka turned toward her. Grievance? She laughed once, no softness in it. I was unconscious in the sea while your PR team was drafting condolences. The line hit like a door slamming shut. A donor at table 4 mouthed, "See? Good. Let them feel late." Before any body was recovered, Nneka said, this family called reporters. Before any forensic confirmation, this family organized mourning. Before any honest investigation, this family turned me into a charitable brand. Taewook leaned forward. "Nah, enough." She looked at him. "No, not yet." Then she laid the mechanic's report back down and said, "I'm alive because a fisherman's family pulled me out of black water, and because the only honest man your family ever produced stole evidence before it disappeared." Now the room turned fully toward Hyuk. He didn't flinch. He looked like he had been expecting them to need a villain in a different suit. Nneka noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything. "I ignored his warning," she said. "That was my mistake. Trusting any of you would have been worse." Then she placed the microphone down for 1 second, reached for her water, and found the glass moved slightly closer than before. Half an inch. Maybe less. Hayuk. A tiny gesture invisible to almost everybody else in the room. Not to her. Not to us. And that is how recognition works. Not grandly, precisely. She took 1 sip, put the glass back, and picked up the microphone again. "At 3:18 p.m. that afternoon," she said, "Dr. Han Min-seok told me I would never carry a child." The room leaned in. Good, because this was the first cut that mattered. The consultation room had smelled like lemon disinfectant and cedar polish. That was the first thing Nneka remembered. The second was the clock on the wall. 3:18 p.m. The third was the file already open on Dr. Han's desk before she sat down. A man who has not already decided your future keeps the folder closed until he speaks. A man who has been instructed what outcome to deliver likes the paper arranged in advance. Dr. Han adjusted his rimless glasses and folded his hands. "We've reviewed your tests carefully. Nneka see." "Then you can walk me through them," she said. He blinked once. Taewook sat beside her in a navy suit, gaze on the abstract painting behind the doctor's head instead of on his wife. That was the first sign. Not the words, the absence. Dr. Han slid the report across the desk. She looked down. Hormone levels, imaging notes, recommendation for marital planning discussion. She read it once, then again. "This estradiol level is normal," she said. Dr. Han smiled with his mouth. "Taken alone, perhaps, but..." "And this scan report uses possible irregularity without pathology. There are patterns that... and the blood draw timestamp is wrong." That one landed. He glanced at the page. Tiny movement. Real. "I had that blood drawn at 9:40 a.m., Nneka said. "Ma, this says 7:10. Administrative inconsistencies happen. Not on core labs used to diagnose infertility." Taewook finally spoke. "Nneka." She turned to him. "Listen to the doctor," he said. No hand on hers. "No, are you okay? Just instruction. Control dressed as calm." The door opened. No knock. Chairwoman Yoon entered in pale gray silk with pearl earrings and a face arranged into sympathy so exact it looked rehearsed. "I was in the building," she said, which explained nothing. Sun-hee sat by the window. Dr. Han cleared his throat. "We were just reviewing the findings." Nneka placed the file back on the desk. "No," she said. "You are delivering a conclusion your data does not support." Sun-hee smiled faintly. "These things happen. Reports are written," Nneka replied. "Oh, they do not happen." The older woman's smile thinned. Taewook exhaled. "This doesn't need to become adversarial." Nneka turned to him slowly. "Your mother arrives uninvited to my medical consultation. Your doctor cannot defend his own report, and I'm the one introducing conflict?" No one answered, because there was nothing clean to say. Dr. Han tried a softer tone. "There are many dignified pathways available. Surrogacy, adoption, privacy." "Privacy for whom?" Nneka asked. Sun-hee leaned forward. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." There it was. Convenience. Always convenience. Nneka stood. The chair whispered against the floor. "I want the original lab records," she said. "Unsigned. Full chain of custody." Dr. Han reached toward the file. "We can arrange that." "No," she said. "Now." Tae-wook rose too. More enough. The word came sharper this time. A command, not a request. Nneka looked at him and saw it clearly then. The consultation was not for truth. It was for compliance. The report was not medicine. It was paperwork meant to make cruelty look respectable. Say it plainly, she said. His jaw flexed. Plainly? Yes. She took one step closer. Say what this room is really about. He looked at his mother, then away. My parents think, he said, it may be better to discuss separation now, instead of prolonging something that has become complicated. Complicated. 4 years of marriage reduced to an inconvenience report. Nneka stared at him. Then she picked up the paper and tore it in half. Once. Then again. The sound was dry and final. Get me my records, she said. She looked at Dr. Han, then at Sunhee, and then back at Tae-wook. And if you want a divorce, file it without using a forged medical lie to make yourself feel justified. She walked out. The parking garage was colder than the office above. Concrete, fluorescent hum, old oil, exhaust. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped her keys. Rage does that. So does humiliation. So does being treated like a malfunctioning acquisition by people who needed your credentials until they decided your body no longer suited the family narrative. 3 rows over, a black Genesis idled with the headlights off. The rear door opened. She would have kept walking if Kwon Hyuk had not stepped out from the driver's side and closed the door with one quiet push. Gray suit, open black coat, a fresh split across his left knuckle. Dr. Obi, if your family sent you, she said, don't save the speech. They didn't. She kept walking. He moved exactly enough to block the driver's side of her car without touching her. That detail mattered later. At the time, it only made her angrier. Don't drive your car tonight, he said. She stopped. What? Do not take your car. She stared at him. We're doing mystery now? His gaze flicked once toward the blinking security camera over the elevator bank and then back to her face. I'm trying to keep you alive. Her laugh came sharp. You expect me to believe that a Yoon man found a conscience in a parking structure? I expect you to hear urgency when it stands in front of you. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed. Somewhere 2 floors down, a car alarm chirped and stopped. The whole garage smelled like wet concrete and expensive lies. What do you know? She asked. Enough to tell you not to get behind that wheel. Say more. Not here. Oh, perfect. She stepped closer, voice low and furious. You do not get to speak in riddles to me after what happened upstairs. Something tightened in his face. Not anger. Closer to disgust. At himself, maybe. I know your insurance changed this month, he said. I know divorce papers were drafted before your consultation ended. I know 2 men from private family security were moved onto Jeju routes for no reason that makes sense on paper. Her stomach turned over. By who? He did not answer. That silence answered for him. What exactly are you saying? Hyuk took a heavy white card from his coat pocket and held it out. No logo, just his name and a number. If you drive your own car tonight, he said, just you may not live long enough to file those papers. The sentence hit her body before it hit her mind. Her fingers closed around the card. He did not reach for her, did not plead, did not soften himself to make the warning easier to swallow. She searched his face for performance and found none. Only urgency, only restraint, only a man who seemed to have arrived later than he should have and knew exactly how unforgivable that was. Move, she said. His eyes held hers. Then he stepped aside. No force, no heroic nonsense. He had not earned obedience. He knew it. That mattered. She got into her car anyway. If you've ever been betrayed by polished people, then you already understand the logic. A warning from inside the machine can feel like one more mechanism of control. She did not ignore him because she was weak. No, she ignored him because survival had trained her not to hand her judgment over to men who arrived with partial truths. The coastal road near Seogwipo had gone silver by then. Her phone lay on the passenger seat, face up, 2 messages waiting. One from a resident asking about a trauma handoff in Seoul. One from a florist confirming peonies for a hospital thank you arrangement. Ordinary life still moving. That is the cruelty of it. Death rarely waits until you are dramatically prepared. The first press on the brake felt wrong immediately. Too soft. She pressed again. Nothing. Her body changed before her mind did. No panic yet. Calculation, downshift, pull right, emergency brake, steering wheel jerking under her palms. The car drifted toward the guardrail. Her phone skidded off the seat and hit the floorboard. And then the hands-free system clicked. Connected call? Unknown private number. The voice came through anyway. You should have signed quietly. Sun Hee. No distortion, no mistake. Nneka's grip slipped once on the wheel because the body does strange things when the mind catches up to murder. Brake! She whispered to the car, absurdly, as if machinery could be reasoned with. Metal screamed. The guardrail rushed. Then there was no road, only black water below and one suspended impossible second where gravity hadn't yet decided who she would be afterward. Then impact. The windshield exploded into a spray of glittering knives. Salt water punched into the cabin, cold enough to feel hot for half a heartbeat. The seatbelt locked hard over her ribs. Her shoulder cracked against the door. The car pitched nose down, then rolled. Now she fumbled for the buckle. Missed. Found it. Water climbed to her waist. Her throat. Her mouth. She kicked at the door. Nothing. Something slammed the side window from outside. Once. Twice. A third time. Glass fractured into black, stinging light. Hands reached in. Rough hands. Work hands. Not Hayuk's. Aja Bassi had been hauling in line just offshore with his nephew when he saw the taillights vanish too fast and too straight. He would say later, "A car falling right don't sound like an accident. It sounded pushed by intention." He ripped at the window frame while his nephew wedged a metal gaff under the edge. Nneka was running out of body by then. Lungs burning. Vision narrowing. One of them got an arm through the opening and seized her jacket. Another hand grabbed her wrist. Hard. Certain. And they dragged her through jagged glass and freezing drag and rising dark into the sea. Then nothing. Waking felt like surfacing through concrete. A ceiling fan clicked overhead. The room smelled like diesel, antiseptic, pepper soup, and damp cotton. A woman hummed softly somewhere near the bed. Not Korean. Not a melody Nneka knew. Something older. A tune carried across water and made domestic by repetition. She opened her eyes. Ibiera Basse sat beside the mattress with a towel over one shoulder and a bowl balanced in her hand. Her face was broad and warm and unsentimental in the way capable women often are. She took one look at Nneka waking and said, "You move too fast. I'll be offended after all this stitching." Nneka tried to sit up. Pain tore white across her ribs and collarbone. A sound left her throat before she could stop it. Ibiera's hand was instantly at her shoulder. Don't prove strength to me. I've already seen enough." The blanket was rough. Her chest was wrapped. Her temple pulled under bandages. Her lips tasted like salt and iron. "My phone," she said. "Gone. My bag. Gone. My—" "Alive," Ibier said. "Start there." A man filled the doorway. Broad shoulders, sea-worn face, shirt smelling of engine oil and Tide. Aja. He looked at her with the practical suspicion of somebody who saves people first and asks questions second. "The news says your husband is grieving," he said. Her whole body went still. "How long?" 2 days, Ibier answered. "You had fever, water in your lungs. 2 days. Enough time for flowers, statements, formal sorrow. Not enough time for rich people to start weaponizing memory." Nneka forced herself upright despite the pain. "They know?" Aja gave one short laugh with no humor in it. "They know what they told the world." A car door shut outside. All three of them heard it. Aja's head turned. Ibiera put the bowl down. Nneka's pulse slammed once against her bruised ribs. Footsteps on gravel. Then a voice from beyond the front room. Male. Low. Controlled. "Aja. Hyuk." Even before she saw him, her body answered in contradictions. Relief, rage, suspicion. Aja did not let him in immediately. Good. The exchange came through the doorway. "You followed me?" Aja asked. "I followed the tow road and police chatter." "You should leave." "If I leave," Hyuk said, "they'll come back less polite than I am." Aja was silent. And then, you one of them? A pause. Yes. Another pause. Then why are you here? Longer this time. Because she survived. Aja let him in. Hyuk entered the room and stopped 2 steps inside the threshold. He took in the bandages, the bruising, the way she was holding herself upright by refusal more than strength. His face altered by less than most people would notice. She noticed. Guilt. Not theatrical. Not begging. Just there. Nneka, he said. She looked at him and said the only thing that mattered first. You were right. He nodded once. Yes. You knew. I suspected. You let me drive. He took that without trying to lessen it. I warned you with too little and too late. Aja looked between them. Ebiere crossed her arms and waited. Start, Nneka said, and he did. The consultation was arranged before your final blood work processed, he said. The divorce papers were drafted yesterday morning. Your insurance rider was amended 13 days ago. 2 private security men were moved onto Jeju routes this afternoon. I thought they were trying to frighten you into compliance. And now? His gaze dropped briefly to the bruising at her ribs. Now I know they meant to kill you. The room tightened. Nneka gripped the bed frame. Why? Because you refused to go quietly. No. Her voice cut. Why really? He understood. Not broad motive. Specific motive. The kind families never say aloud because saying it makes even them sound monstrous. Your marriage had stopped serving the future they wanted, he said. The false report gave them a socially acceptable reason to remove you. In divorce without scandal, sympathy for him, clean lines for the family. And murder? Cleaner than contest. Aja muttered a curse under his breath. Nneka felt the room move away from her for a second. Not physically, just in the way reality sometimes detaches when truth arrives in its ugliest form. She looked at Hyuk. You knew this family was capable of something like this. Yes. And you stayed inside it. Yes. That honesty should not have mattered. It did. Not enough to soften him. Enough to make him dangerous in a way liars never are. He reached into his coat slowly and pulled out a clear evidence sleeve. Inside was a photocopy of a mechanic's preliminary report. He set it on the side table. Nneka picked it up with careful fingers. Front and rear brake lines severed, clean tool marks. Her mouth went dry. The copy? She asked. The original is hidden, he said. If they find out I took it, every backup dies with it. So you stole evidence from your own family. I preserved it. That line was colder than a boast and more useful. Ebiere pushed the bowl toward Nneka. Eat while being furious. Fainting helps no one. For one split second, absurdity broke the room enough to keep everybody from drowning in it. Nneka took the spoon. Pepper soup, hot enough to sting. Ginger too sharp. Real. Hyuk waited until she swallowed. They've already started the death narrative, he said. If you surface now, they bury the evidence and call you unstable. If you stay dead for a while, we have time. We. Yes. You don't get a we because you arrived with documents. No, he said. Nah, I get a we because if they find you here, this house becomes a crime scene. Aja's head tilted. That true? Yes. Aja looked at Nneka. Then he moves you. After that, I decide if I break his face. Fair, Hyuk said. At 11:40 that night, they moved her. Busan first, not Seoul, not Jeju. A gray Kia Carnival with tinted windows and a blanket folded under her shoulder. Ebiere beside her. Aja driving. Hyuk in a separate car because Nneka had made that rule with eyes hard enough to make it law. You stay behind us? Fine. You do not tell me to calm down. I wasn't going to. Good. The road north unspooled dark and endless. Every guardrail looked personal now. Every curve in the road carried memory under the skin. 3 hours in, nausea rose hard enough to stop the car. Nneka stumbled onto cold concrete near a rest station. Palms braced against the curb while her body emptied itself of seawater, bile, and whatever faith remained in polite suffering. A car door opened behind her, then stopped. Hyuk did not come closer until she looked up. That restraint again. He crouched only after she gave the smallest nod. He held out a bottle of water. No pity in his face, no attempt to touch her. She took it. Their fingers brushed for half a second. Cold skin, steady hand, not romance, data. A man who did not crowd pain to make himself feel useful. By dawn, they were in Busan. The apartment sat high above Marine City, all glass and pale oak and expensive anonymity. The entryway smelled faintly of cedar and new paint. The sea beyond the windows was gray and metallic, flattening the horizon into something too clean to trust. Aja checked locks, balcony, utility closet, vent grates. Rich people hide in polished boxes, he muttered. Would you prefer a motel? Hyuk asked. I'd prefer a world where brake lines don't get cut over inheritance. Not available today. Nneka sat on the edge of the sofa because standing had become expensive. Hyuk set a folder on the coffee table. Food in the refrigerator, he said. Pain medication in the right cabinet. A private doctor arrives at 8. No Yoon doctor. Retired thoracic surgeon from Mokpo. Hates corporations. Owes me a favor. Good. When the doctor arrived, he was 62, silver-haired, and carrying a black bag with cracked leather and the permanent expression of a man who had once worked too many hospital nights to be impressed by anyone's money. He examined her carefully. Concussion, bruised lung, fractured clavicle, 2 cracked ribs. He should have admitted you, he said. He couldn't, Hyuk replied. The doctor did not bother looking at him. You people always think blood obeys scheduling. Then came the blood draw. Routine, he said. Hydration, infection, internal concerns. He tied the tourniquet around her arm and asked, almost casually, when was your last period? Nneka frowned. Ocean, funeral, murder, identity collapse. Her cycle had not exactly been prioritized. I don't know, she said. Before Jeju. 5 weeks maybe. The doctor added another vial. Why? She asked. He met her eyes. Nah, because trauma does not care what else is happening in a body. The test came back that afternoon. Positive. Nneka was standing by the kitchen island when he said it. You're pregnant. The room tilted. Not in the dramatic way, in the body way. Knees going uncertain, sound dropping far away. Ibiere sat down hard enough to rattle a spoon in the sink. Aja muttered, no, like the word itself might reorganize the world into something less cruel. Dr. Seo glanced at the paper again. Given your levels, likely around 8 weeks. 8 weeks. Before the consultation, before the report, before the divorce papers, before the cliff. Nneka's hand covered her mouth. The infertility lie split open fully in that instant. They had called her barren while she was already carrying children. Hyuk stood by the window and did not speak. None that mattered. No congratulations. No soft sentiment where horror belonged. Finally, he said the thing none of them had wanted to name first. If they knew there was a chance, they would have moved faster, Nneka said. He looked at her. So did everyone else. Because now the attempted murder had changed shape. This was not wife disposal. This was erasure of heirs. Dr. Seo put prenatal supplements in a plain vitamin bottle and said, you need an ultrasound in 48 hours. Caution, not celebration. Good man. That night the city glittered below as if wealth could ever mean safety. Nneka sat at the dining table in one of Hyuk's white shirts because her own clothes no longer fit the story she had lived through. A mug of ginger tea cooled between her palms. The positive test lay face down beside it. While Hyuk stood in the kitchen slicing pears, straight lines, quiet movements, blade against cutting board. She watched him for a while before saying, sit down. He did, across from her, not too close. Again. Did you know? She asked. No. Did they? I don't think so. You don't think. If they had known for certain, the strategy would have been different. That was a Hyuk answer. Precise enough to be useful, brutal enough to bruise. Nneka looked at the test. They called me infertile. I know. I was already pregnant. I know. Her laugh cracked in the middle. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes. You can spend years being useful to a family, she said quietly, and still end up disposable the minute your usefulness no longer suits their plan. He said nothing. She dropped her hand. Tell me the rest. He leaned back slightly. My older brother was preparing to expose irregular payments tied to a Busan port expansion 3 years ago. He said, he died in what police called a suicide. Nneka looked up. I did not believe it, he continued. I stayed inside family security because I thought proximity meant control. I thought I could limit damage if I remained useful. Did you? Sometimes. Not enough. No. Again. No defense, no excuses. Just the truth set down where it could not be pretty. She held his gaze. You knew the shape of the beast before it reached me. Yes. The room cooled around that word. Here is where weaker stories make the woman grateful too soon. This one doesn't, because gratitude without accountability is just another form of silencing. Nneka folded one arm carefully over her ribs. Then hear me clearly, she said. You do not get to stand in front of me like a shield and imagine that balances what you knew. I don't. Good. A long pause. Then he said, I'm not asking to be forgiven. She waited. I'm asking for instructions. That landed harder because he meant it. Not poetry, terms. Nneka sat very still. Then she nodded once. Fine. No one makes medical decisions for me again. Agreed. My children are not leverage, not in timing, not in strategy, not in negotiation. His answer came without pause. Never. You tell me what you know when you know it. I would rather be afraid than managed. Done. She watched him. And if you ever decide your family matters more than the truth, then tell me before I have to discover it from another cliff. His face changed by less than a breath. I won't. Then he pushed the plate of sliced pears toward her. Eat, he said. She stared at the plate, then at him. Was that an order? No. What was it? Pattern recognition. His eyes flicked once to the tea, then back to her face. You stop eating when you're overwhelmed. Nneka blinked. How do you know that? You never finished dinner at family events when your pager had gone off more than twice. There. The first crack in the wall. Not desire, recognition. She took one slice of pear and bit into it. Cool, sweet, clean. The room stayed quiet around them. Not strained, just present. If you have ever had someone remember a detail you didn't know you were showing the world, then you already know how dangerous that can feel and how impossible it is to dismiss. The ultrasound happened in a clinic above a pharmacy near Centum City with a flickering sign and an owner who owed Dr. Seo a favor. Nneka wore a baseball cap low and a surgical mask because anonymity had become a second skin. Hyuk stood by the door, hands in his pockets, watching everything except her face because he understood that fear sometimes needs privacy. The technician moved the wand. The monitor flickered. Then sound. Fast. Small. One heartbeat. Nneka's hand clamped over the sheet. The technician adjusted the angle and smiled. Oh, she said softly. There's another one. 2. 2 quick, impossible rhythms filling the dim room. Nneka closed her eyes. Not from weakness. From impact. When she opened them, Hyuk had gone utterly still. The technician printed the images and tucked them into a plain envelope. Outside in the corridor, under a buzzing fluorescent tube and beside a vending machine humming too loudly, Nneka held the envelope in both hands. Twins, she said. Hyuk looked at the paper, then at her. Yes. Her breath went uneven for 1 second. His hand lifted half an inch as if to touch her shoulder. Stopped. She saw that. Made a decision. She stepped forward and pressed the envelope lightly against his chest for 1 brief second. Not to give it to him. To let him hold the shock with her. He did not touch her. He just stood there and carried the weight of that silence properly. That is where trust began. Not in declarations, in permission. Dead women are useful to powerful families. And that is another ugly truth nobody says out loud. Dead women cannot contradict the press release. Dead women cannot challenge the medical report. Dead women cannot walk into a boardroom with timestamps, blood work, and living children. So for the first 6 months, Nneka stayed dead on paper and rebuilt herself in the shadows. Retired prosecutor Park Jun-seo, arrived on a rain-heavy Thursday at 6:12 p.m., carrying convenience store kimbap, an umbrella dripping onto the tile, and the irritated expression of a man who had spent 30 years watching rich people call crime reputation management. He set the kimbap on the counter, accepted the copied mechanic's report from Hyuk without ceremony, and read in silence for a full minute. Then he looked up at Nneka. "Good," he said. She frowned. "War good? I hate cases where the guilty are poor. Too easy for the system to pretend it's functioning." He tapped the page. "This is cleaner. Wealth leaves records." Nneka liked him instantly. Park was late 60s, cheap tie, rumpled charcoal suit, nicotine-yellowed fingers, and the kind of dry voice that made even contempt sound efficient. He ate with concentration, one triangle of tuna kimbap at a time, while Hyuk laid out what he had copied before leaving family security. Insurance rider changes, internal calendar blocks, security reassignments, private travel logs, a list of shell companies tied to Yoon Construction and Busan port expansion. Park listened, asked only useful questions. "Who signed the rider?" "Dr. Han as witness. Tae-wook authorized." "Who moved the security men?" "Internal chief of staff." "No, but the request originated higher." "Can you prove higher?" "Not yet." Park chewed, swallowed, nodded once. Then he looked at Nneka. "If you surface now, they'll call you unstable, grief-traumatized, manipulated, maybe criminal if they can connect your survival to document irregularities. If you stay hidden, they get comfortable. Comfortable people leave fingerprints." Nneka rested both palms on the dining table. "I am not staying hidden forever." "Good," Park said. "Forever is for cowards. 6 months is strategy." Hyuk said, "Longer if needed." Park looked at him over the bridge of his glasses. "You don't get to suggest patience to the woman your family threw off a cliff." A tiny silence. Hyuk accepted it. Understood. That mattered. Again, people keep making the mistake of thinking love stories begin with softness. Or they don't always. Sometimes they begin with a man who can take deserved criticism without trying to rearrange the truth to protect himself. The alias came first in paperwork. Dr. Nia Okafor, clean enough to pass, close enough to remain hers, Nigerian enough to belong in her mouth without tasting like theft. Park handled legal scaffolding through an old judge in Daegu who disliked corporate dynasties on principle. Hyuk handled the invisible architecture, lease structures, private transport, secure digital storage, burner phones, clinic referrals that could not be traced back to the Yoons. Nneka handled the part that mattered most. She survived forward. Recovery was not graceful. That also matters. The scar at her temple itched when the weather changed. Now her clavicle healed with a bitterness in the muscle that made buttoning shirts with her left hand irritating for months. She woke some nights already fighting water, throat locked, hand clawing at sheets twisted around her waist like seatbelts. The first time it happened in Busan, she snapped awake at 2:41 a.m. with a sound trapped in her chest and shattered a water glass reaching too fast in the dark. Hyuk was outside the study doing what he often did at that hour, reviewing files, making calls to men who owed him things, existing in the thin, sleepless zone where dangerous people organize consequences. He was at the doorway in seconds, stopped there, not crossing, not assuming. "Nneka." Her breath came ragged. Glass glittered on the floor near the desk. He looked at the broken pieces, then back at her. Do you want me in or out?" That question did more work than comfort would have, because there is a world of difference between support and intrusion, and men who understand that are rare enough to feel almost fictional. Nneka sat up slowly, one hand pressed to her sternum. "In," she said. He came in and sat on the floor instead of the bed, back against the wall, lower than her on purpose. He handed her a towel for the blood beading from a cut on her palm. "Dream?" he asked. "Memory?" He nodded. "No. You're safe now, speech. No clumsy soothing, just presence." After a while, she said, still staring at the dark window. I heard her voice again. "Sunhee?" "Yes." He rubbed the scar across his left knuckle once, absently. "I recorded the line she used through a voice analyst," he said. I haven't shown you yet." Nneka turned her head. "You have a recording?" "Call routing records." Not the voice itself. Enough to place timing, enough to support sequence. And you were waiting to tell me? I was waiting for a day when your body could handle hearing that the memory was correct. Silence. Then quietly, you believed me before the evidence. Yes. That one sat deep. The next morning she found a fresh glass of water on the desk and a folded note in his compact handwriting. Drink before coffee. Headache reduction by 30%, according to Dr. Seo. No signature. He knew she'd know. That was another thing. He never announced care like it was charity. He simply built it into the environment. 3 months later, she scrubbed in for surgery again. Private suite, small caseload. Dock worker, 34. Abdominal trauma from a crane rigging failure at Busan Port. Internal bleed, tight window, the kind of case that made every other sound in the room fall away. The OR lights hit hard and clean. Chlorhexidine in metal. The crisp rustle of gowns. Monitors pulsing with patient urgency. Her hands hovered over the scrub sink for 1/2 second too long. The nurse beside her, older, discreet, recruited through one of Park's contacts, said, "Doctor?" Nneka looked up into the steel reflection and saw herself in cap and mask, scar hidden, shoulders set, eyes older. Then she scrubbed. Inside the OR, the first incision was perfect. Not because she felt strong, because she was what she was. 46 minutes later, the patient was stable. When she stepped into the recovery corridor and stripped off her gloves, she found Hyuk by the vending machine with 2 bottled waters and no expression on his face at all. "Report," he said. She looked at him. At the bottles. At the one with the cap already loosened because he had noticed her left hand still tightened under strain. "Patient lives," she said. His gaze held hers. "And you?" She let out a breath she had been holding since the first cut. "I'm still a surgeon." Something moved in his face then, small, profound, as if that was ever in question. Here is the thing about being seen properly. It can undo you faster than cruelty ever did. Because cruelty you can fight. Recognition gets under the armor. The twins were born on a humid September night after labor that stretched long enough to make the clocks feel offensive. 30 hours in, Dr. Seo leaned over the bed and said, "No, you can prove your resilience another day. We're doing the C-section." Nneka, sweating through a labor gown in fury, glared at him. "You've waited 30 hours to become authoritarian." "I've waited 30 hours to become right." Even in pain, she almost laughed. A girl first, Zikora, then a boy, Chima, tiny, furious, loud enough to announce themselves to the whole floor. Hyuk waited outside the operating room in dark slacks and a black crewneck sweater, coffee cold in one hand, phone silent in the other. When the nurse wheeled out the bassinets and asked, "Family?" he answered after one brief pause. "Yes." Not loud, not possessive, just certain. He did not touch the babies until Nneka told him to. That was another one of his languages. Permission. Later, back at the apartment, while life became milk-warm and sleepless and gloriously undignified. Burp cloths over the back of a cream chair that definitely cost too much for spit-up. Diaper boxes stacked beside encrypted drives. Sesame oil and baby formula sharing a pantry shelf. Midnight feeds under low kitchen light while Busan glittered beyond the glass, as if anyone in that city knew 2 hidden children were redrawing the axis of a corporate war. One night at 3:17 a.m., Nneka woke to silence and panic hit first, because mothers learn quickly that silence can be as frightening as crying. She padded to the kitchen in one sock and one bare foot and stopped in the doorway. Hyuk stood at the counter in a plain white t-shirt, jacket gone, sleeves pushed up, eating cold rice from a bowl while Zikora slept on his shoulder with one tiny fist hooked into his collar. When a stack of financial records sat open by his elbow. The stove light split his face into gold and shadow. His phone buzzed once on the counter, screen lighting up with a voicemail notification from a saved contact. Jae-hyun, his dead brother. He didn't touch the phone, just looked at it for one beat too long. Then back to the ledger. That was the moment she saw him. Not the strategist. Not the former head of security. Not the terrifyingly calm man who could reroute a threat with one phone call. Just a lonely man eating cold rice over the sink so a baby could stay asleep. He looked up. You should be in bed. So should you. He glanced at the child on his shoulder. She has opinions. Nneka leaned against the doorway and watched him sway almost imperceptibly, on the unconscious rhythm of someone trying to keep a baby asleep, even after forgetting they are doing it. You're holding her wrong, she whispered. He looked mildly offended. She seems unconcerned. Her neck. He shifted one careful hand. Better? Yes. A beat. Then, thank you. His eyes lifted to hers. For what? She looked at Zikora's tiny hand in his shirt collar. For not needing applause every time you do something kind. He said nothing, but the room changed. Later that week, with both babies finally asleep after a combined campaign of hunger and indignation, Nneka stood at the kitchen counter making Indomie noodles at midnight because her body wanted salt and heat, and no one alive was going to stop her. Hyuk came in from a meeting, set down his keys, loosened the top button of his shirt. Arin watched her pour seasoning. You're using too much water. She turned. Are you critiquing my noodles? I'm protecting texture. You're insufferable. He took the pot from her with infuriating confidence, drained exactly the right amount, added the spice packets, then opened the refrigerator and pulled out chopped scallions she had not seen him prep. She stared. Did you plan for me to want this? You always want something salty after a hard day. Again. Recognition. He slid the bowl toward her. Steam rose. One fried egg on top because he had also learned that her resistance to comfort weakened in the presence of a good egg. She took one bite and closed her eyes for half a beat. This is dangerous, she said. What is? A man remembering details. His mouth shifted slightly. Nah, should I stop? No. The first time she laughed again, really laughed, body and all, was over a crib. He had assembled half of an outrageously expensive Scandinavian crib in the living room, while Chima watched from a bouncy seat with the solemn judgment only infants can produce. The side rail was upside down. 2 screws were wrong. The instruction manual was folded and abandoned on the rug. Nneka stood in the hallway in loose cashmere pants and a nursing bra under one of his old shirts and watched for a full minute. Then she said, You've put the headboard where the side rail should be. Hyuk looked at the frame, then at her. Have you considered, he asked, that some people learn through structural experimentation? The laugh hit her before she could stop it. Too hard, too sudden. Now she had to press a hand over her incision and bend at the waist. Hyuk was on his feet instantly. Don't. She was still laughing. You built a modernist trap for a newborn. It was evolving. It was upside down. Even Chima made a suspiciously timed little noise from the seat that sounded like agreement. That night, after fixing the crib correctly, Hyuk found her asleep on the couch with one twin sprawled on her chest and the other in the crook of her arm. He didn't wake her. He just draped a blanket over all 3 and turned off the lamp. She knew because she woke an hour later under the weight of softness and saw him sitting at the dining table in the dark, reviewing a security report by tablet light. The domestic simplicity of that moment mattered more than any grand declaration could have. Not rushed, not performing. Just present. Years built themselves in scenes. Small, specific, stubborn scenes. Hyuk replacing every kitchen knife after watching her wince at the balance of the cheap set. Nneka taking his hand at the sink to clean and rebandage the split skin over his knuckles after he put one of Taewook's contractors through a glass partition for threatening Park. You could let someone else do the violent work, she said while taping gauze over the cut. I did. You still hit him. He reached for Park. She looked up. You enjoy sounding reasonable after violence. I enjoy being accurate. The sterilization room was bright with antiseptic and stainless steel. She pulled off one glove, then the other, set them down. He watched her too closely. You do that on purpose, she said quietly. What? Wait until you've made it impossible for me to object. His voice lowered. No, I wait until you have room to choose. That one reached somewhere deep. She stepped closer, one hand braced against the edge of the counter, the other touching his jaw, warm skin, faint cedar soap, the pulse in his throat steady. If I do this, she said, do not confuse gratitude with permission. His answer came instantly. I won't. Good. Then she kissed him. Slowly. Not heat first. Relief first. The kind of kiss that feels less like ignition than recognition finally given a body. When they parted, his forehead rested lightly against hers. "Good," he murmured. She almost smiled. "That's all?" "For now." It was enough. But peace built in hiding is always temporary when the people who profited from your death are still alive. The leak came on a Tuesday. 2 grainy photographs. One of Nneka lifting Chima from the back seat of a silver Honda Odyssey outside her discreet clinic entrance in Haeundae. One of Hyuk carrying a sleeping Zikora on his shoulder, pink sneakers dangling, while Nneka keyed open the side door. The images landed on Taewook's phone at 11:09 a.m. By noon, Sun-hee had them too. By evening, a private investigator matched Nneka's gait and profile to archived gala footage. The dead had become inconvenient again. The first direct move was not dramatic. It was the nanny camera. 4:11 p.m. 2 men in gray gas company jackets at the gate of Nneka's sole rental, clipboards in hand, forged utility work order visible through the intercom screen. Mina, the nanny, frowned and did exactly what Hyuk had drilled into every adult around the children. She did not open the gate. She pressed the silent alert. Upstairs, Zikora was building a block hospital and assigning Chima the role of incompetent intern. Chima was objecting on principle. By the time the men reached for the latch, Hyuk's security team was already in motion. The takedown happened in the blind spot near the side hedge. Fast. One man on the gravel with his arm zip-tied behind him. The other trying to run and folding to the pavement when Hyuk stepped into his path and removed his balance with one terrifyingly economical movement. No shouting, no performance. Just outcome. That was the dangerous side the audience had been waiting to feel. The calm was the threat. Nneka arrived 7 minutes later in a cream blouse, on navy trousers, and blood on her cuff from a procedure she had left mid-afternoon when the silent alert flashed across her phone. She got out of the car, saw one fake gas jacket on the ground, and the whole world narrowed to the front door. "Where are they?" "Upstairs," Hyuk said. "With Mina." She moved past him before he finished the sentence. Up the stairs, 2 at a time, heels abandoned halfway because speed mattered more than posture. The twins hit her at the landing talking over each other. "Mommy, the men were weird." Mina said code yellow. He wasn't real gas because he had office shoes. Nneka dropped to her knees and gathered them to her so hard they squealed. When she came back downstairs with one child on each hip and both arms visibly shaking from effort and adrenaline, now the zip-tied man was still on the gravel outside. She looked at him once, then at Hyuk. "How close?" He answered truthfully. "Front gate." How close if Mina had opened it? He said nothing. Didn't need to. That silence was answer enough. Nneka shifted Zikora higher on her hip and looked at the man on the ground like she was calculating where exactly to cut a body so it would stop being dangerous. Then she handed both children to Mina, stepped outside, and crouched in front of the intruder herself. "Who sent you?" The man spat blood onto the gravel and smiled with 2 teeth red. "Don't know what you're talking about." Nneka looked at the fake gas badge clipped to his pocket. Then she reached out and pressed 2 fingers into the nerve bundle just above his clavicle with the exact, more precise cruelty of a trauma surgeon who knows the human body too well to bluff. He choked. His whole torso jerked. "Who sent you?" she asked again. He sucked in a ragged breath. "A law office." "Name?" "Han Seong." Park, standing in the doorway by then, muttered, "Yoon Proxy." Good. Now it had shape. Now it had traceability. That night the smear campaign began. Anonymous forum posts first, then pickup by tabloids, then cable chatter. Woman claiming to be dead heiress, linked to identity fraud. Questions surround Dr. Nia Okafor, licensing path. Was Memorial Gala appearance a trauma episode? This is where stories often lose force because the public smear becomes abstract. It shouldn't. Humiliation has texture. Now, one article used Nneka's old hospital headshot beside a current grainy surveillance image and headlined it, "Grief Delusion or Calculated Deception." Another quoted an unnamed source saying she had become obsessed with reclaiming a dead woman's life. She sat at her kitchen island at 1:14 a.m., laptop light harsh on her face, and read her own erasure rewritten as instability while half a bowl of bibimbap went cold beside her. Hyuk came in quietly, glanced at the screen, and closed the laptop with one hand. She looked up, furious. "I was reading that." "No," he said. "You were bleeding into it." She pushed back from the island. "They are making me into an imposter in my own skin. Yes. I hate how calm you sound." His jaw shifted. "Calm is how I keep from breaking things too early." That landed. Park arrived 10 minutes later with 3 newspapers and the energy of a man who had been waiting his whole retirement for a family like the Yoons to overplay their hand. "Good," he said, dropping the papers down. Nneka stared at him. "You and that word." "They're afraid," he said. "Afraid people get sloppy. Sloppy is admissible." But the ugliest truth was still waiting. Park found it in a file tied to Busan port payments and brought it to the dining table on a rain-heavy night when the children were asleep upstairs and the apartment felt too still. He set the folder down in front of Nneka. "What is it?" she asked. He looked at Hyuk first. Hyuk had already gone motionless. "Your brother," Park said. Inside the file, clippings, internal memos, death certificate. Kwon Jae-hyun. Cause, suicide by hanging. Nneka looked up slowly. Park tapped the memo. He was preparing to expose labor kickbacks and bribery tied to the port expansion. He died 2 days before his meeting with prosecutors. Nneka's eyes went to Hyuk. "What did you know?" His voice stayed level. "That it wasn't suicide." "When?" "Immediately. The room went cold. And you stayed." "Yes." Nneka stood so quickly the chair scraped loud against the floor. "You knew your family could arrange deaths. I knew they could cover them. Do not split language with me." He absorbed the blow. Rain hit the windows in hard diagonal lines. Somewhere upstairs, one of the twins murmured in sleep and settled again. Nneka stepped away from the table because standing near him suddenly felt like standing too near the cliff edge all over again. You knew the machine was capable of murder before it reached me, and you still thought a warning in a parking garage balanced that? No. Then what exactly did you think it was? His face changed then, finally. Not defensiveness. Something raw. "Too little," he said. "Too late." She laughed once with no humor in it. "You do not get to stand beside me as if standing there erases the years you spent making yourself useful to people like that." "It doesn't." The speed of the reply almost hurt more than excuse would have. He crossed to the credenza, took out a matte black archive box she had never seen him open, and set it on the table between them. Inside were notebooks, flash drives, copied logs, photographs, payment trails, investigator notes, route maps, private correspondence, and the whole hidden skeleton of his private war. "Take it," he said. She stared into the box. "What is this?" "Everything. Everything you should have handed over years ago." "Yes." Silence. Then he said the line the script needed him to earn this time. "I won't fix you, Nneka. I see you. I'll stand with you if you want me there. But I won't make you carry me while you decide." That worked now because it came after cost, not before. He picked up his coat. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Out." "Out where?" "Anywhere you can breathe without me in the room." Then he left. The lowest point came in family court, emergency guardianship review. That was the filing. Now, Chairwoman Yoon's lawyers argued that because the twins were biological heirs to the Yoon family, and because Nneka had lived under a false identity after a severe trauma event, the court should consider supervised evaluation of the children's custodial environment. Legal violence. Expensive and clean and utterly predatory. The courthouse in Seoul smelled like damp wool, old paper, stale coffee, and cameras waiting to feed. Park moved ahead through the reporters. Nneka wore an ivory suit, no visible jewelry except small gold studs, hair pulled back hard enough to show the scar at her temple. She was not hiding anything now. Hyuk was not beside her. That was deliberate, needed, punishing. Tae-wook sat opposite her in charcoal suiting with grief arranged into his face like a corporate talking point. Dr. Nahan sat behind counsel in rimless glasses, trying to fold himself into irrelevance. Proceedings began, then the assault. Alias framed as fraud, survival framed as delusion, the memorial gala framed as psychological instability. And then Tae-wook stood and said in that polished executive voice, "This woman is unwell and has attached herself to my late wife's identity." For one horrifying second, the room accepted the shape of the sentence. Not fully, but enough. That is what institutions do to women. They make you prove yourself at the exact moment you should never have had to. Nneka's hands went cold. Then the back doors opened. A small voice cut through the courtroom. "Mommy, Chima, not supposed to be there." He had slipped Mina's hand in the corridor after spotting Nneka through the glass, and now he ran down the aisle in a dinosaur sweater, one shoelace undone, righteous with urgency. The room inhaled. Nneka was out of her seat before thought, down to her knees, arms open. He hit her full force and wrapped himself around her neck while camera shutters exploded in the hall. A second later came Zecora, furious at being left behind. Mina said no running, she announced into the side of Nneka's jacket, then looked up and frowned at the room. Why are these people looking weird? It is hard to sustain a lie when truth arrives with baby teeth and no training in decorum. Tae-wook stared, not at Nneka, at Chima's face, at the Yoon eyes, the grandfather's mouth, bloodline rendered undeniable in a child who only wanted his mother. And at the back of the courtroom, entering at exactly the moment timing stopped being accidental and became strategy, Kwon Hyuk stepped inside in a dark navy coat with Chima's loose shoelace looped around 2 fingers. His gaze found Nneka first, then Tae-wook, and the entire room adjusted. After adjournment, in the side corridor outside records, Tae-wook turned on him with the brittle fury of a man who had finally realized he was no longer controlling the audience. "You're destroying the family." Hyuk stood 4 feet away, hands in his coat pockets, voice low. "No." Tae-wook stepped closer. "Then what do you call this?" "Correction. You think she'll forgive what you knew? That was never the point." "Then what is?" Hyuk looked at him with the kind of calm that makes other men understand too late what fear is actually for. The point, he said, is that you mistook her for someone who would vanish cleanly." That line followed Tae-wook into the final collapse. Mi-ran delivered the next turn. She requested a private meeting at the Signal Tea Lounge, all silver service, skyline, and women pretending not to hear ruin unfolding at neighboring tables. She arrived in cream silk, no wedding ring, posture immaculate. She placed a USB drive on the saucer between untouched cups. "My husband keeps 2 safes," she said to Nneka. "One for documents he can admit to owning. One for the things he believes no woman in his life will ever see." Nneka looked at the drive. "Why help me?" Mi-ran's smile was elegant and dead. "Help is generous. I am correcting my own humiliation." "Fair," she continued. "He married me for Busan port leverage and a future bloodline. And I discovered he had neither honesty nor patience to offer. Those are expensive disappointments." Park took the drive. "What's on it?" "Fertility records, payment transfers to Dr. Han, life insurance amendments, and a canceled private paternity inquiry filed by Tae-wook 2 weeks before Jeju." Nneka went still. "He suspected?" Mi-ran nodded once. "Enough to ask." That changed everything. Not panic. Calculation. Outside the tea lounge, 2 men moved too quickly toward the entrance. Hyuk saw them through the reflection in the window before anyone else did. He was at Nneka's side in one stride, hand at the small of her back only long enough to turn her toward the service corridor. "Move." She moved, because trust, once earned, changes the speed of obedience. Now the shareholder emergency hearing took place on the 38th floor of Yoon Construction, in a boardroom lined with glass and disciplined wealth. Souls spread below in steel and light. Journalists packed the outer hall. Compliance officers filled one side of the table. Investors watched with the hungry stillness of people deciding where loyalty stops being profitable. Nneka entered in the same ivory suit she had worn to court. Hyuk half a step behind. Not ahead. Never ahead. Tae-wook stood when she came in. "Still making entrances," he said. She took her seat. "No," she said, "just corrections." Then the dismantling began. Park opened with the mechanic's report, the call routing records, the insurance writer. Then he nodded to Nneka. She did not look at him. She looked at Dr. Han. "This is estradiol level," she said. eye tapping the page, does not diagnose infertility. Dr. Han adjusted his glasses. In context, it is normal. She turned the page. This ultrasound note cites possible irregularity without pathology, without biopsy, without specialist referral, and with immediate marital planning implications. That is not medicine. That is pretext. One compliance officer leaned forward. Nneka slid another document across. This blood timestamp predates the actual draw by 2 hours and 30 minutes. Impossible unless your lab had access to time travel. Nobody laughed. That made it worse. She pulled out the male factor template. This language, she said, matches one of your archived male infertility case notes almost word for word. You reused a template and failed to remove the coding. Dr. Han's face drained. Tae-wook tried to intervene. How she obtained internal, Park cut across him. Will matter after attempted murder. Then, Nneka laid down the canceled private paternity request. Date stamped. Executive authorization attached. The room shifted. Pens lifted. Eyes sharpened. She looked directly at Tae-wook. You knew there was a possibility I was pregnant before your doctor called me barren. He said nothing, because what was left to say? Nneka let the silence do its work. Then Park submitted the sealed DNA report. Unsealed by order. The twins were Tae-wook's biological children. A pulse ran through the room. Nneka did not let sentiment contaminate the victory. Biology is not redemption, she said. Paternity does not erase conspiracy, and blood does not confer character. Sun-hee spoke then, brittle for the first time. You are humiliating this family. Nneka turned toward her. No, she said. I am naming it correctly. And there it was, the final realization. Not for Tae-wook, for Sun-hee. She understood in that moment that this was not the downfall of a wife they had mishandled. It was the return of a woman they had never actually seen. That blindness had always been the fatal flaw. They underestimated her intelligence, her memory, her skill, her capacity to endure, and the simple fact that some women survive not because they are lucky, but because they are made of sterner material than the people plotting against them. Arrest warrants moved quickly after that. Dr. Han first, then 2 former security operatives tied to the Jeju tampering, then Tae-wook. He tried one final appeal to image on the walkout, officers closing in, and cameras waiting beyond the glass. This could have been handled quietly, he said. Nneka looked at him with a stillness colder than rage. You tried quiet, she said. It sounded like brakes failing. Then they took him. Sun-hee's punishment was cleaner and slower. Board removal, asset freezes, charity audit, social ruin among exactly the circles she had spent decades training to envy her. No handcuffs that day. Something worse. Time. And then Nneka did the thing that made the whole story transcend revenge. She took the foundation bearing her dead name and rebuilt it in the shape of her living one. The Nneka Memorial Charity Gala disappeared. In its place came the Obi Recovery Initiative, trauma surgery support, emergency legal identity restoration, safe housing partnerships, medical advocacy for women leaving coercive families and violent homes, 1 floor for clinical care, 1 floor for legal reconstruction, a small pediatric wing named for Ebir Bassi. Aja refused sentimental naming rights and accepted a new boat with a stronger engine and better sonar. This one, he said, patting the side, won't lie to me in bad water. Park chaired the ethics board and complained constantly, which meant he was happy. Miran disappeared to Singapore and then London, sending 1 anonymous donation every year from an account Park pretended not to trace. The aftermath was real. That matters. Nneka still checked brake response twice before pulling out of garages. Still woke some nights with her hand already reaching for children who were sleeping safely down the hall. Now still had to sit in the driver's seat after school drop-off sometimes because watching the twins disappear through a door she did not control could make her chest lock tight without warning. Healing is often repetitive, unglamorous. It looks like therapy appointments, background checks on staff, routes changed, children buckled in with your own hands. It looks like learning that safety is not a fantasy if you have built enough of it yourself. And Hyuk? He did not ask for reward. He stayed. In the back row at the twins' school presentation in a navy coat, pretending not to notice when Zikora waved too hard from the stage. On late grocery runs for strawberry milk, seaweed snacks, and the exact sesame crackers Chima insisted were Dr. Crackers, fixing a loose cabinet hinge without mentioning it. Me leaving food outside Nneka's study door on the nights, grant proposals and budget reports ran too long. One evening, months after sentencing, after the twins had built a pillow fort in the living room and finally fallen asleep inside, it's surrounded by stuffed animals and the remains of a contraband cookie situation, Nneka found Hyuk by the front door, taking off his shoes quietly. The house smelled like laundry detergent, children's shampoo, and the galbi gym they had eaten too late because Tuesday had become impossible. He looked up. What? She crossed the hall, picked up the guest slippers from the basket by the door, and set them aside. Then she looked at him and said, "You can stop pretending you're visiting." He did not move for a second, just looked at her, at the basket, at the sentence. Then, and careful because belonging had always cost him something, he asked, "Are you sure?" Nneka's mouth softened. "I wouldn't have said it if I wasn't." His exhale was nearly soundless. He set his shoes where family shoes go, by the door, in the morning light of the life they had actually built. And here is the thing about being buried alive by other people's convenience. If you survive it, you stop negotiating with rooms that require your disappearance. You become exact. You become expensive in all the right ways. And when a woman who knows how to save lives decides to save her own name with that same precision, there is not a family on earth rich enough to outspend her clarity. The final image was not a gala, not a courtroom, not handcuffs. It was sunlight, early morning in Seoul, pouring through the broad clinic windows of the Obi Recovery Initiative onto polished floors and moving bodies. Downstairs, young doctors in navy scrubs trained in a simulation room, while legal advocates sorted intake packets for women arriving with children, bruises, missing documents, and voices still learning how to return. On the wall where the Yoons had once projected her memorial portrait, there was now a brass plaque, simple lettering. "You are not hard to love. You are hard to erase." Nneka stood above the training room in surgical blues, tablet in hand, scar visible at her temple because she no longer cared to hide the map of what she survived. Below, a resident asked a sharp question about thoracic trauma, and she answered without hesitation, voice clean and sure through the glass. In the courtyard, Zikora and Chima crouched over the pavement with fat sticks of chalk, drawing crooked purple hearts, and what Chima insisted was an ambulance but looked more like a smiling refrigerator. Hyuk crouched beside them in shirt sleeves, holding a coffee in one hand and a yellow chalk stub in the other while receiving very serious artistic instructions. Nneka watched them for a second, one hand resting lightly against the glass. Not haunted. Anchored. A soft knock came at her office door. Park stepped in, older than when this began, and somehow more irritatingly pleased with himself. "There's a call from Osaka," he said. "Auditor traced old Yoon construction money into a shell company tied to your friend's brother." Hyuk looked up from the courtyard then, as if he felt his name arrive without sound. Some graves, it turned out, had been dug long before hers. Nneka straightened, set down the tablet, and smiled the kind of smile only survivors earn. Not because the world had become gentle, because she had become impossible to move quietly. If you stayed with me through this whole story, then you already know this was never just about revenge. It was about name, body, truth, and what happens when a woman refuses to let the people who harmed her become the authors of her memory. Drop a comment and tell me this. What is one boundary you are setting for yourself now that you finally understand your life does not have to remain convenient for the people who hurt you? And if you know somebody who needs this story, share it with them and subscribe because we tell the stories that do not let women disappear.